Messicks, a helping hand with your land.
Neil from Messicks here. Today we're going to do a quick walk around our repair lot out here, talk to you about the top 10 ways that we see tractors damaged. First place that we're going to start here is on damage to wheels and tires. You can guess a lot of places that tractors go, they're in some pretty vulnerable and rough environments. And sometimes we see guys do damage to their tires. Now that can come in a bunch of different ways, obviously through sharp things slicing or poking into the rubber, or pushing the bead off with the rim and knocking the air out of it, or busting off the valve stems. Some of our tractors are gonna have guards around these valve stems to keep things from coming through and cleaning them off, but not all of them do. If you're gonna be working in some dangerous areas, one of the things you could do if your tires are adjustable is to flip them so that the valve stems are in the inside. Gives you a little bit added protection from cleaning these things off. Many of us are out working in wooded and rugged areas, and you wouldn't believe the amount of damage that something as simple as sticks can do to your tractor. Generally, when you have a loader, you're gonna have a grill guard on there that's gonna protect against the big stuff, but it does very little to protect against, the very common small branches and that kind of stuff that you might be running over or pushing with your loader. When those things make it through to your tractor, they could do things like bust out headlights, knock pieces out of your front grills, get up into the underbelly of the tractor and punch at filters, or get up into transmission fans. There's a lot of damage that's done to these machines by something as simple as sticks. So when you're out operating your tractor, you want to be mindful of that. Don't run over things if you don't have to. Something is sitting there and curved. When you drive over top of it, just watch that it doesn't pop up underneath the machine. Taking small steps in order to be cautious about what you're doing when you're in those wooded environments can go a long way to preventing a lot of this stupid cosmetic damage. You're gonna find if you get out and operate a stock tractor at night that the factory lighting on these things is almost never adequate to go out and do real work at night. Something as simple as adding a loader to your tractor and having that bracing and the bucket and stuff in front of the machine pretty much makes the headlights rather ineffective. So a lot of guys choose to go and start doing things like adding work lights up on their roofs or roll bars or different places on the tractor in order to augment that lighting at nighttime. There's a couple things you want to be cautious about when you do that. Those lights become another thing that a stick or something can take out. A lot of times too, if you let the wiring dangle, it becomes something that's really easy to snag and rip off in some fashion. So you just want to be keeping an eye on that. The tail lights on the back and the lights on the ROPS all kind of fall into that category. They're exposed and easy to knock off. There are several manufacturers of aftermarket work lights, Artilian being one of them, that are going to go through and give you brackets or guards in order to try to protect against that kind of stuff. Those light kits are going to be a little bit more expensive. They're going to require additional accessories and stuff, but those guards are offered for a reason. It's because guys tend to knock this stuff off. So if you can handle it, spending a little bit of the extra money in order to not just put those lights on, but also protect them from damage is usually money well spent. Our next point of damage is to the seat of your machine. Oftentimes when you're out working, you carry things around in your pockets, right? Tools, screwdrivers, whatever. It's really easy to forget that that stuff is back there. When you go and plop your butt back down on the seat, the tips of those things can go right through the seat fabric or through the vinyl there itself and punch holes in there. And once you have a hole, it's only a matter of time until that gets worked around and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, ultimately kind of causing the structural integrity of your seat to not be so good. So before you go plop down in that machine, take a moment and check and see what you got in your rear pockets. Just had a phone call this morning from a customer who bent his quick coupler. You could do damage to these couplers in several different ways. When you have an implement on here and securely locked in place, they're generally okay because that implement helps strengthen the front end of the loader. But if you go through, say you're swapping implements, you go through, you pull your handles, you back out, you drive into the next implement, pick it up and drive away, and forget to lock these things down, that implement can fall off of your loader. Or if you have, say, a little bit of dirt between the implement and the quick coupler, when you push the pins down, the pins may not engage the entire way, allowing that implement to slip off of there or to bust the tips of the pins. When that kind of stuff happens, you will often see guys tweak these couplers. If one side of this is attached and the other one isn't and it pops off, it can do all kinds of weird torsional loads on the front of the loader. So when you take these implements on and off, take a second, make sure you have that second look to make sure that everything is firmly engaged, the pins are the entire way down through the holes, and both of the levers are pushed down and locked. For our next item, I've actually done a complete video on this sole topic, and it's being mindful of your front hydraulic cylinders on your loader. As these cylinders extend at their longer points, they become more vulnerable to bending. It makes sense, right? When the thing is collapsed on itself, it's stronger than when it's extended the entire way. A lot of guys, when they go do things with their loaders and say back drag with a loader bucket or try to pull a grapple rake backwards, will go and extend these cylinders the entire way, put their implement into the ground and back up. And when you do that, you create a situation where if you hit something with your implement, that you could tweak and bend these loader cylinders. So it's a surprisingly common part for us to have to replace after these things have been bent up a couple times. You'll start to get leaking around the seals and that kind of thing on your loader cylinders. So when you're doing work, meaningful work out here on the end, and you have that chance that you could catch something, make sure you don't have these things at full extension. It is surprisingly easy to bend the top link on a 3-point hitch. In fact, on an older tractor like this, it's almost more unusual to come back here and look at the back of one of these machines and see a straight factory top link. When you see one of those, you know the person probably wasn't using their 3-point hitch a whole lot. There's a bunch of different things that you could do to go through and make sure you don't bend these things up. First, when you're taking things on and off of your 3-point hitch, it's usually better to do the lower links first than to put a top link on your attachment and then say drive the tractor around to push that implement into place in order to get the other links hooked up. Start with the lower links first before doing the top link. The other thing you're going to watch too is once you have this stuff hooked up, as it goes up and down through its travel, make sure there's nothing in the way that it's going to contact. The geometry of all of your 3-point hitch implements can be different. The manufacturers never know to be able to set everything up to accommodate every conceivable implement. So you might find some things where, say, this top link is really close up here to the tractor and can hit things as it's going up and down. So put an eye on the travel path of all of this linkage before you start moving things around. A modern tractor can lift a shocking amount of weight in proportion to the size and weight of the machine. When you look at what you could do with these front loaders, it is amazing the size loads that they're able to manipulate. Speaking for my own machine, with my tractor with a grapple on the front, when I'm picking up some logs and heavy loads, I've been out in situations before where, say, the back tires of the machine come off the ground just slightly, and you've got nearly the entire weight of that machine and the load sitting over top of just that front axle. And no matter how stout the manufacturers build those front axles, that bouncing loads and stuff are going to cause problems with those front axles eventually. One of the most common repairs you'll see done on these small tractors is where the front axles come out and their drop boxes are bolted onto the axles. There's some seals and stuff in there that, as those loads are put over top of them, will open up a little bit over time, and you'll start to see a little bit of leaking happening out the bottom of that connection. Being mindful of how you're working those loads around can help prevent that kind of stuff, so be sane about what you're lifting with your tractor. If you are lifting heavy loads, make sure that you've got adequate ballast behind the tractor to make sure that load is spread out across the tractor and not just sitting on the front axle. Tractors are fundamentally tool carriers, right? It is a machine that is meant to take implements to get a huge variety of work done. There is nothing quite as exciting as taking a new implement home to put on your tractor and see exactly what you can do with it. And when you do that, hook that thing up for the very first time, you really want to step back and take a look at that machine, all of its geometries, that top link that we were talking about, how the side links have connected, and lastly, your PTO shaft. When you hook a PTO powered implement onto your tractor for the first time, you want to stop and make sure that the PTO shaft is able to stretch out and contract freely when it needs to. As the implement goes up and down through the arc on your 3-point hitch, this shaft moves in and out. The shafts themselves often come through a little too long for some tractors, and you'll find that the shaft is the entire way back and bound up, and when you go lift your implement up, it can actually bend the shaft. So you want to make sure that you have a little bit of free play front and back on that shaft as it goes through the arc on the 3-point hitch, and make sure you cut these things down in order to allow them to have that movement. Otherwise, when you take that brand new implement on the back of your tractor and lift it for the very first time, got a couple $100s worth of damage before you've even gone anywhere. I've always had a lot of respect for people who are really good operators of equipment, particularly the guys that run the construction machinery, the excavators, the track machines, that kind of stuff. There is a huge difference between somebody who simply owns a piece of equipment and somebody who has taken the time to become a skilled operator on one. So lastly, when we're looking at our equipment out here, you always want to take a moment and remind yourself in the back of your head that these machines are not indestructible. If you go through and you push a machine too hard, you put forces on it in ways that it doesn't like and it wasn't really intended for, you're going to bust the thing up and it's going to not last as long. Its resale value is not going to be as good. It's going to cost you more money over the life of that machine. And fundamentally, when you know how to use a piece of equipment and you're banging it around in that way, just tell yourself that's probably not the best way to do it. That does not mean you're more productive. Just because you're crashing around, a guy who knows how to use a piece of equipment properly is fundamentally going to get more work done without tearing the thing up. So put that in the back of your mind. Just because you own a piece of equipment doesn't mean that you are a master of it. Be impressed by those guys who have developed those skills, and let's all strive, myself included, to raise ourselves to that level of those expert operators. If you have a piece of equipment that you're shopping for, if you have parts and service needs for a machine you've already got, give us a call at Messicks. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at Messicks.com. Log in the front and my back tires lifted slightly off the ground. That puts a lot of weight and a lot of strain on these front axles in order to move through their travel path and be able to what do you call it? Stretch and contract, expand and contract, okay. Tractors are, after all, gee whiz, having a loader on the front of the